What's the most bizarre house rule you've encountered at someone else's home? Story 1. The most bizarre house rule that I've encountered was at my friend's place, where they had a strict policy of no talking during dinner, not because of any traditional reason, but because their elderly grandmother believed that a mischievous spirit living in the dining room would learn secrets and cause chaos. Story 2. I cannot sit on the couch at my dad's house if his wife is home because she will feel invaded. She has to have the whole couch to herself, so I get to sit in a dining room table chair. Story 3. Playing beer pong at this one couple's house, and the rule was if the ball hit the floor and their cat got to it first, everyone had to finish their drinks. Cat was wicked fast too. Story 4. Once stayed at a relative's place where they had a strict no radio waves after dark rule post-sunset. Wi-Fi was shut down, phones were powered off, and even the microwave was a no-go zone. They believed that radio waves interfered with sweet dreams. The first night I was there, I felt like I time-traveled to a pre-internet era. Story 5. Kitchen hours. I stayed at a friend's house when I was younger. Nobody told me the entire family has breakfast at 7 a.m., so I slept and nobody woke me up either. BTW. I wake up around 9 a.m. and see my friend is gone. I wander into the kitchen and see them all sitting around the table laughing and eating a huge breakfast: pancakes, eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice, fruit, etc. My friend's mom looks at me and goes, "Hey, look who's finally awake." The kitchen is closed, but there's cereal in the pantry if you want to serve yourself. So I poured myself a bowl of cereal and went to sit down at the table, and the second I sat down they all stood up and left the kitchen, even my friend. To this day, I don't understand why they did that to me. Story 6. When I was a child, my mom had a friend who would watch me for an entire weekend, or a week during the summer. She had a daughter that was a year younger than me. She was an absolute clean freak. I liked her because she would take me places, but she had a lot of rules. Couldn't wear shoes in her house. Okay, not all that weird. But she would take your shoes to the basement utility sink and scrub the bottom of your shoes. Can't have your pants too long, because they might drag on her floor and get dirt on her floor, so I had to roll up my pants. Can't touch the walls, because the dirt from your fingers might get on her white walls. If it was nice outside, you're eating outside because your crumbs may get on the floor. She was also an English teacher. Even at 6 years old, I couldn't say yeah, you say yes. Only ignorant people say yeah. Can't say I'm going to take off my shoes. Only rockets take off. You remove your shoes. Couldn't say I'm done. According to her, only turkeys are done. You are finished. Story 7. When I was around 8, I went to a friend's house for a playdate dinner after school. When I asked for a drink, her mum gave me a baby bottle with squash in it. I laughed, but she didn't laugh back. My friend took her own bottle and started drinking. I asked the mum if I could please have a cup instead, but she told me nope, and that children drink from bottles in their house. Never went there again. Story 8. In high school I had a friend whose dad was in the military. Not only did he make us do house chores, dusting, vacuuming, dishes when visiting, sleeping over, but he also woke us up at 6 a.m. by banging pots and pans to make us run around the neighborhood. He called it morning boot camp. Needless to say, I only slept over there a few times. I felt so bad for her. Story 9. When I was a kid, my friend's dad made his kids line up on the couch and just sit there silently while he watched TV and drank a beer. If you were visiting, you had to do it too. When my mom heard about it, I wasn't allowed to go over there when he was home. My mom knew an abusive weirdo's behavior when she saw it. Story 10. When I was like 14, my friend was having a Halloween party. I had my period, so I went to the bathroom to change my pad. I wrapped up my old pad in some toilet paper and threw it away. The next day at school, my friend said her mom was going through the trash. I guess this was something her mom did, and she found the wrapped up pad and was angry about it. My friend, who was also another girl, got in trouble for it because her mom thought it was hers. This was 15 years ago and I'm still so freaking confused by it. Story 11. Must be up by 9 a.m. and fully clothed. No pajamas or sweats, etc. Even if it was the weekend, and even if you had no plans to go anywhere or do anything, we would wake up and just sit there. Story 12. My friend's mom wouldn't let her put any trash in the bathroom trash can. There was a trash can there, but it was just there for show. They were directed to put all trash generated in the bathroom down the toilet. Story 13. I went to see a college friend over the summer, stayed the night. Her parents weren't home when I got there, and we went into the living room to talk. There were 4 recliners, no couch or other chairs. She sat in one recliner, I sat in another. She asked, "What are you doing?" and informed me I was sitting in her dad's chair. The remaining chairs belonged to her mom brother. Where was I supposed to sit? On the floor. Story 14. I had a friend when I was a kid, and sometimes I would go to his house. The kids couldn't eat at the table at the same time as the adults. We had to wait for them to finish and leave the table, and we couldn't talk at all at the table. Always found it to be weird. Always felt a creepy vibe in that family, even though I was a kid. Edito. And they pour sugar in Coke. Yes, they drank Coke with even more sugar. Story 15. Went to a friend's house for a sleepover when I was about 7. The rule was no talking at the dinner table. The dad was in the other room watching TV while myself, friend, his sister and mother were supposed to just eat in silence, and the whole vibe was like, don't anger daddy. Super up and sad to think people live like that. Story 16. I had a job that involves going into people's homes. I had an inspection once at house where the homeowners insisted that I put on this light blue bathrobe over my clothes and white slippers to enter their home. The husband, wife, and adult daughter who lived with them were all wearing the same blue bathrobes. This was in the US Midwest, just a typical American Midwestern family, so it wasn't even like a cultural thing that I was unaware of. I still wonder to this day if they were messing with me. Story 17. You couldn't ask for get a drink halfway through a meal. You either had to ask for get one before you were served or wait until you were done. I could never understand it. Story 18. Attended a birthday slumber in middle school for a girl that I wasn't really close with. My mom wanted me to go because she knew the girl didn't have a ton of friends. So, it's a weekend night, probably a Friday. We're all in our sleeping bags on the floor, giggling and talking like most middle school girls do. Her mom comes in at like 9 p.m. and tells us it's time for bed, and if she hears any of us talking, she'll call our mothers and make them come pick us up. FFS. Who does that? Story 19. I had a high school best friend who had to change out of her school clothes the minute she got in the door. Her mom was also oddly obsessed with her patting her face dry instead of rubbing it. I guess that's not a rule, but I can remember 2 separate occasions where she got in trouble for this. Apparently because it ages you, but her mother would also buy us smokes, so, edit. I've really been enjoying reading all these replies, and TL that maybe we were the weird house because we didn't have this rule. D. Story 20. I once went to a party at the home of a colleague of my now ex-husband, where we had a very nice and collegial potluck dinner with another couple. So, there were 6 adults and 2 children of the hosts, age maybe 8 and 10. After we ate and moved to the living area, the 2 hosts declared a period of silence to concentrate on digestion. It wasn't like a moment of silence either, but like 10 minutes or so, we and the other guest couple were looking at each other like, WTF, it was awkward AF, not knowing when it would be over and okay to resume normal conversation. I felt like a little kid put in timeout and hated it. We cut the visit short and never accepted another invitation from them. Story 21. A school friend's parents had a rule where you couldn't wee directly into the toilet water and had to aim for the inside edge of the bowl. I forgot one time and was never allowed back again because they'd heard me wee. Story 22. I met a girl at a new school and she invited me to spend the night and asked me, do you smell bad though? We had a girl over once and she smelled so bad. So my parents want to know if you smell bad. I never went to her house. Went home one day and mom said we were moving back to our old neighborhood, so I never went back to that school again. Story 23. Grandparents of my childhood friend. We weren't allowed to step on the doorstep's thresholds. We always had to step over it, never directly on, still don't know why. Story 24. That if I'm on my menstrual cycle, I am forbidden to have tampons or cups. So I was at a friend's house and I left my tampon wrapped in a small plastic bag in their trash. Their dad whipped it out and yelled at me for using tampons, while holding the tampon. Story 25. My wife stayed home with our 2 kids, and their various friends were frequent guests. She was happy to have them over, but she established that she was not there to entertain them. They had quite a bit of freedom to do things, or to do nothing, but if they tried to involve her she would have them clean something around the house. So one day our daughter had 2 friends over, one who knew the ropes at our house, and one who didn't. The latter started to say, I'm bored, and the former quickly said, quiet, or she'll put us to work. Story 26. It wasn't really a rule, but I got invited and my parents jumped at the opportunity to a friend's house quite often. The friend's mom was sort of weird. WHE was usually in her bedroom on her computer, unless she was in the living room demanding us to paint her nails. Anyways, the rule was eat before you get there because you won't be fed while there. If you're there while they have dinner you sit in the living room or my friend's bedroom and wait. Weirdly, this extended to breakfast and any other meal had while I was there, no matter how long I was there. Anyways, I figured out by age 8 that I can go 3 days max without eating before I pass out and get sent home. Edit. Honestly, y'all, it seemed so normal at the time. I would literally wake up in the morning and play with Brat's dolls while she finished breakfast. I wasn't abused or anything, just sort of neglected I guess, but it wasn't this woman's responsibility to take care of me tbh. I appreciate the kind words. Thanks guys, hope you'll have a great day. Story 27. No Disney in the pews. Back in the 80s. The first babysitting job I ever had was when I was 12. The neighbor called and asked if I could babysit. The Disney Halloween special was about to come on and it was my favorite, but I said yes because I figured I could just go watch it with the kids. I get over there and they start going over the rules for the kids, and one was no Disney and apparently we could only watch anime cartoons. This was the 80s. I didn't know anything about Moonies or their weird rules. I said okay, then me and the kids watched the Disney Halloween special anyways. They obviously didn't rat me out because I kept babysitting for her and it was never brought it up. I never did it again. If I had known ahead of time I would have just said no and stayed home to watch the one thing I looked forward to every year. Yeah, they were in a cult but still really nice people. Story 28. Rented a basement room in a house after college for a couple months while my internship finished up. The family said no flushing the toilet after midnight. Were very clear this was important. Being in college, I was a frequent enjoyer of social establishments, so coming home late at night after the bar left me with few options. Sorry, downstairs sink. Story 29. Having to ring the bell by the gate and wait minutes until my neighbor same age as me would open the door and come to the gate to let me in. I would hear them hectically moving around behind the door when I rang the bell. Turned out years later that they hid a girl, which they adopted because doctors told the parents that they were infertile and can't get a child on their own. Right afterwards they got pregnant, and then again my friend, they were upset that they got lied to and tried to bring the girl back but they refused. The only thing the parents came up with was to hide her. I walked in and out their house several times a week and never knew she lived there. Story 30. I heard about a woman who, when she went to nursing school, would wash her feet in the toilet every night before bedtime. When asked why she did that, she said she was from a large family, and they would all line up at bedtime and do this. This would have happened in the late 1950s or early 1960s. Story 31 went over to a classmate's house and the children weren't allowed on the furniture. She was not even allowed to sit on her own bed. All children sat on the floor. My poor classmate was hardly allowed to touch anything in her own room without permission. It was bizarre and uncomfortable. Never went back. Story 32. It wasn't a rule as such, but my friend in our early 20s was living in the family home alone as his mum moved in with her boyfriend, and she put post-it notes all over the house with the rules, like flush the toilet, replace the loo roll, turn the lights off. They were everywhere. Story 33. A friend of mine has a rule that nobody is allowed to use his frying pan, his wife and kids included. Edited to add for those getting outraged. This was not known or pointed out before I was already cooking scrambled eggs using said pan with a plastic spatula. I have 3 different sizes of the same pan and know how to use a non-stick pan without damaging it. Calm down. I was staying there for a few days after a surgery and used his frying pan without knowing, and when his wife spotted it she quickly warned me nobody is allowed to use that. It's his special frying pan and he doesn't let anyone use it. I laughed and said I don't play that childish when he came in and got all upset about it. By that time it was too late as ID finished cooking and was cleaning it. He then hid his frying pan from everyone. Because I had the time and have a bit of a malicious streak, and it was only a 40 pan, I decided to prank him and I went and bought the same pan from a local store the next day while he was at work. I took photos of myself using it to cook, pretending to clean it with a steel wool pot scrubber, and drilling holes in it with his cordless drill, printed the photos at a local stationery shop and put them in about 20 photo frames around his house, and stuck one to the fridge. His wife and kids thought it was hilarious, and still have one on their fridge a year later, and any time we go away together I take one and put in on the fridge of the Erbenbodel just to remind him that he's a man-child and it's just a frying pan. Story 34. My friends thought it was weird that they weren't allowed to go into the basement when they were at my house. I didn't know this until we were all much older, which I then explained that my parents were major potheads and the basement is where their smoke spot was located. Also discovered that's why one of my friends wasn't allowed back over her parents recognized the Ode to Stoner on her clothes. Story 35. My aunt had a rule that nobody was allowed to use the bed comforters to actually sleep under. Comforters were just for looks, and had to be removed and folded up before going to bed. Story 36. Knew someone who was an engineer for BT back in the 90s. He used his skills to build a household PBX exchange with a billing system. Once a month he would present his children with a printed bill for the calls they made. He also had a payphone for visitors to use. Story 37. I went to my childhood friend's house for dinner, and her dad legitimately refused to let us drink any water for an hour before dinner, so we didn't spoil our appetite. Story 38. I've run into a few odd ones over the years at one friend's house. Only the father was allowed to touch the TV, turning it on or off, changing the channel, adjusting the volume or antenna, didn't matter, it had to be done by dad, and if the father wasn't home or was busy elsewhere in the house, the TV couldn't be used. At another very sheltered kid's house, the TV wasn't allowed to be turned on before 5 p.m. I can still remember the mother saying to us television is a nighttime entertainment only. The kid in question, this was about 1st or 2nd grade, was amazed when he found out about before and after school cartoons while visiting our house. In fact, he didn't even realize TV stations were on the air before 5 p.m. His parents didn't let him come over anymore after he apparently told them all about the cartoons we watched at my house. At a relative's house, everybody had to be in bed and asleep by 11 o'clock p.m. Watching a sporting event or movie that isn't over yet. Too bad, it's bedtime. Wanted to see your favorite comedian guesting on The Tonight Show. Nope, still working that Sunday crossword puzzle. You'll have to finish it tomorrow. Major news event happening and you want to keep tabs on the latest reports. Sorry, it's time to sleep, even if throwing a party for grown adults. And things were fun and lively with cocktails and snacks. All the guests knew to be out of the house by 10:59 p.m., because by 1100 it was bedtime for the hosts. Yes, even on New Year's Eve. Lastly, in high school I had a friend whose parents would rearrange the living room furniture every 3 months so the carpet would wear evenly. Story 39. I just thought of one. Although it was not something I encountered at the time, I lived in a city where it was well over 105 for over 14 days. During an informal office get-together, a few of us women commented how the first thing to come off at home was our bras. As teenagers and young adults, she and her sisters had to wear a bra while sleeping. Her mom or grandma would occasionally do a bed check. If they were braless, they would be beaten. As an adult, she still could not break the habit of wearing one. Her own girls were warned to always wear one while visiting grandma and GT grandma. Story 40. Not only did the cats get to walk on the table during meals, but you were supposed to let them eat off your plate because otherwise you were interfering with the will of a sentient being. I love my own cats. Honestly, I love practically all animals, but they don't get to eat off my plate or stroll around on the table, and even if I was okay with that I certainly wouldn't expect a guest to share their plate with one of them. Story 41. These are from one ex-friend house. We were friends in middle school. Immediately after getting home from school she had to sit down at the table and recount her day step by step, including all conversations. Not like school was okay, we had a test in math and I think I did good. We had chicken at lunch, but when I got on the bus I said hi to the driver and sat in my seat. My partner wasn't on the bus this morning so I read 5 pages of my history book. The bus was quiet for the whole ride. Then we got to school and I stopped to talk to X at her locker. She was wearing Y and Z and asked if I saw Inuyasha last night. I said no and she asked me why, etc. etc. 2 must complete homework and study after accounting day for at least 2 hours. I guess not that weird, but weird to me. 3 never allowed to lock doors for cannot leave house without putting on makeup and having hair styled, every day. Not her rule she made, her mother's rule for her. She had to wake up 2 hours earlier than most everyone else on school days just to do this. She was a pageant girl so her mom was a loon. 5 wasn't allowed to shower, only bathe with the door open, there was no curtain, red flag now as an adult, but at that age I just thought it was weird. She also regularly bathed with her younger sister who was only a few years younger than her. 6 can only watch TV with both parents present. All around weird person with a weird home life. Almost feel bad for her looking back, but she was an in the end so meh. Obsessed with being popular, having the best grades, and cried when she found out Santa wasn't real, in 8th grade. Edit yes she was into me and did some really horrible things. Yes she was being abused at home but no that doesn't mean she gets a pass for the things she did to me in high school. She can still be abused at home and still be in. I think I was her punching bag to let out all that anger on, and she was the reason I attempted suicide, so I'm sure you can see how it would be difficult for me to not think of her as an even after all these years. Story 42. This one time at a sleepover in the morning we got breakfast. They filled up my bowl with cereal and poured like 2 drops of milk on it. I was like WTF fill that up. Then years later I realized they were trying to save money. Story 43. I stayed on a friend's house for a few days as a student, and he was adamant I put dirty toilet paper in the corner for the compost. Rather than flushing it, I thought he was joking until I used the bathroom and saw it there. Story 44. No eating in the dining room. A woman I know kept her dining room table set with all her china and crystal all the time. The family ate on TV trays in the den. Story 45. My mom's house. Leave the mirrors in the bushes. All pennies stay where they are. No playing music, no cell phones and always apologize. Tot hank your food. Story 46. I was required to take my shoes off at the door. Totally normal, right? Except their house was neglected AF and every surface was covered in filth, dog hair, person hair, dirt, old spills, dirty clothes, etc. I would have rather kept my shoes on in her house. It was my best friend's house, so I was over all the time for years. We didn't use slippers and definitely walked barefoot socks on that nasty floor. Story 47. I stayed at a friend's house for a few days when my parents were out of town when I was 13 years old. I have always been someone who draws a lot. I went to art school for my undergrad. When I started drawing in my own notebook after dinner, my friend told me that if her father caught me, I would be in real trouble because he thought drawing was a waste of paper. So I stopped drawing for 4 days. When I returned home, I rushed up to my room, grabbed a drawing pad and drew for hours. The funny thing is that her dad was a lawyer. You know how I said that I was in art school for undergrad? Well, for graduate school eventually I went to law school and worked as an attorney for almost 30 years before I retired. Most lawyers waste an inordinate amount of paper, both in and out of court, especially when this guy was practicing. Story 48. When we slept at my best friend's house growing up we weren't allowed water after 8 p.m. because that's when her mom went to bed and she didn't want us waking her up to use Tuesday bathroom. She had a little yippee dog who would bark at every little sound and if we came out to use the bathroom, she would bark. I only slept over there a handful of times lol. Story 49. I had a friend in middle school whose parents had very strict rules. No shorts or tank tops allowed, even for pajamas. I brought shorts and a t-shirt to sleep in and the mom freaked, found a pair of sweatpants for me and informed me I wasn't permitted to leave my friend's bedroom without a bra on. She also woke us up by singing some Rise and Shine song and clapping her hands. The kids weren't permitted to speak while eating, and you ate what was on your plate and then waited to be dismissed. If you didn't clean your plate, you had to sit at the table till you did. Television only allowed on public broadcasting on approved shows. We stopped being friends after she came over to my house and we watched Labyrinth and TMNT the 1990 version, TYVM. Her parents found out, called my parents, and the next time I saw her at school, she said she wasn't allowed to speak to me anymore. I felt bad for her. Edit the song got in my head, so I went and found it. Listen at your own risk. Story 50. I work in EMS and once got called out for an unknown problem. We get to the house, and this older woman stops us at the door and hands us booties to put on, NBD. Our boots are gross, and we're respectful. Then she asks us to sanitize our hands again, NBD. She looks us up and down, eyes our equipment, and asks us to wipe it down with Lysol wipes. Okay, we aren't sure why we're there yet, so I ask if it's okay if I wipe the bag down as we walk inside, and my partner can wipe down the monitor, and we'll leave everything else on the porch cool. So we're walking, we're talking, we're wiping. She's telling us her husband was having some indigestion, and she felt like he wasn't taking it seriously. Okay, alright, okay. We walk into a hoarder house and fire is working an active arrest NO booties or Lysol smell. We kind of take a beat like, what the? And then the lady dumps some sort of saltashire mixture on us, tells us we're blessed, and says she had to get rid of our evil attachments before we could come in and perform our medical duties. I'm fully aware there may have been some mental health issues going on. I'm also extremely well versed on various spiritual and cultural practices, and wasn't even mad I got herbed or salted or ashed. I wasn't confused about being cleansed of attachments. Made sense. You didn't make those firefighters with their community dicks and all their vibes get cleansed before they came in. That one has tattooed on his chest and that one did it and they both were drunk. Respectfully, ma'am. With love. That's bullshit LMFAO. A friend of mine growing up would have to be up by a very set time every morning, even on the weekends, and he would have to recite a Bible verse that he intended to apply to his actions that day. What made this doubly weird is that his family wasn't hyper-religious at all, just different. Story 51. This one time ISIL told us to take our shoes off before entering the house and leave our shoes outside, so for a brief split second we were walking on her little patio area barefoot. What was weird about this was that this was the first, last, and only time this was asked of us. Story 52. It wasn't exactly a house rule but more of a lack of one. I went over to a friend's house for the first time when I was about 15 and her dog took on the floor. Well, it was a very new puppy and these things happen, I suppose, just needs more work on toilet training or let it outside more often. What floored me was that my friend just kinda draped a shirt from a hamper over the dog's turds, shrugged, and said my dad's the one who usually cleans it. It was the last time I went over to her house. If she couldn't even be bothered to pick up dog off the floor, God knows what else was going on in that house. Story 53. Once I went to a house and the entire house is just covered in cloths. The parents were raising a big rabbit in the kitchen which is also covered in clothes, and they have an entire wall of DVDs for some reason, and we were not allowed to watch any of them. Also, we were not allowed to move the clothes around. Story 54. Once I broke down in front of this old guy's farm. It was late at night, so he offered for me to stay, but I had to sleep in the bed with his beautiful single daughter. It was freaky weird. Story 55. When I was young, my parents regularly brought me over to this couple's house. We'll call them John and Mary. John and Mary had no kids, however. John was a huge nerd that had toys and video games, and so it was generally a fun time to go there while they went off and did adult. However, they had a rule that nobody pooped indoors. It isn't that their toilets didn't work, or that they had plumbing problems, or anything that would make sense. Peeing indoors wasn't an issue. They just didn't like the smell of lingering in the house. Anytime someone had to make the poopies, they had to go to an outhouse and dump in there. I never learned what they did with it. It's not like they had a garden or anything that I can recall would warrant doing this. It's just weird. Story 56. When I was a teenager, I went to my friend's house, and his mom was like, house rules, we're gonna go around the table and introduce ourselves before we say grace, like, hi, my name is X and am Y years old and I like Z. I got up and walked outside and called my mom to come pick me up. MF psychopaths. Story 57. Pretty low on the bizarre scale, just something unusual, I guess. I had a friend whose family dressed up for dinner Sunday nights. Dad and the brothers were ties and a jacket, mom and the sister, fancy dresses. It wasn't a religious thing either. Story 58. Not really bizarre, I guess, but my ex's mom is a very tightly wound, cleanliness-addicted woman. No shoes on in the house. Her fridge and separate upright freezer are stocked and organized according to her liking, and if you want to put something in there you'd better ask. She had a meltdown BC. I put some frozen pot pies in the freezer when we stayed there for a week. She also didn't like anything except for plastic water bottles on the middle shelf of her fridge. That's the water shelf, and she will remind you if you forget. I wasn't allowed to sit on a straight-backed dining chair to breastfeed my newborn in her kitchen. She made me sit on a bar stool instead, no back support. Also, when you use the shower, she expected you to deep clean it immediately after. I bathed my newborn in her newborn bathtub inside the normal bathtub and just emptied rinsed when I was done. BC, I had to get a crying baby diapered, dressed, and settled down. She stuck her head into the guest room 3 times within 10 minutes to ask me to go properly clean the tub, and the last one was that she came home one day and I was lying on the couch watching TV while my baby napped. She said she doesn't like people laying around during the day, so I went back and laid down in the guest bedroom. BC, I was a mom to a newborn and wanted to lay around. Story 59. Years ago, myself, 8, and little sister 6 were having tea at a friend's house. The big bro 14 and big sis 16, and the little sis 8 was our friend. A plate of jam tarts and little fowl tins were placed on the table, and told this was our dessert. Myself and sister only liked the strawberry ones and so had 2 each of those. My friend and her siblings had 2 each of the black currant and lemon curd ones. Then the mum came in and my friend and her siblings literally went pale and froze, eyes darting at all our plates. Psycho mum flipped her and screamed at my sister and me that we were vile, disgusting, greedy pig gannets for both eating 2 tarts the same flavor when the house rule is. When eating jam tarts you can only have one of any flavor. If eating multiple tarts, WTFL. Like, why would we know that was a house rule, as it was the first and last time we had been there, and even at 6 and 8 years old a rule regarding any desserts was ever mentioned before anywhere. Myself and sister, still now 30 years on, still feel on edge when we see jam tarts. However, the absolute obvious terror and visible shaking from her kids, the teens' reaction seemed more scary, made it more traumatic of a memory, as this was a big deal and clearly there had been severe consequences in the past for this broken rule. We never asked them all why this was a rule and why they were so scared, and never talked about the incident with them. Probs, because I was too scared to hear the answers. Story 60. Remained standing until invited to sit. A friend in middle school brought me home to meet her parents. She sat down on the couch and I sat down next to her. Her mother immediately bellowed, "What are you doing? You have not been invited to take a seat yet." When I talked to her later about it, she told me her mother does that to everybody who comes to their house. Story 61. At one of my aunt-uncle's house, everyone had to turn the water on and off multiple times during a shower, like turn it on to get wet, turn off to shampoo, back on to rinse hair, etc. Story 62. While on a Rotary exchange to Denmark for a year, my host family post-dinner always rolled dice. The loser did the clean-up and dishes. Sometimes I hit a bad stretch of roll luck and was in the suds for quite a while. Story 63. My auntie would put a plastic cover over her lounge suite and guests had to sit on it. It was sweaty, squeaky, and uncomfortable. She would also hover outside the bathroom wearing rubber gloves and a cloth with disinfectant on it to wipe everything over as soon as you got out. We all called her Auntie Antiseptic.